Tonight, you will be visited by 3 spirits. The ghost of Christmas Carol past, the ghost of Christmas Carol present, and a third one. My name is Kent, and this is your half-hour call.
Good evening, Christmas Carol Company. This is your half-hour call. Half hour. If you have not signed in, please do so at this time. Half hour.
Hey there, friends, and welcome to another episode of Half Hour Call, where we're dedicated to shining the spotlight on technical theater. So if you like how-to videos, interviews with industry leaders like you're watching right now, or general theater updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss anything. Today, you are in for a real treat. I was able to sit down with stage managers who have been working on remounts of A Christmas Carol for several years. I was able to chat with Emily Bohannan, who is one of the stage managers at the Alley Theatre in Texas and has been doing their production of A Christmas Carol for the last 5 years, and Cheryl Mintz, who is the resident supervising stage manager at the McCarter Theatre in New Jersey and has been working on their production of A Christmas Carol since 1994. But that's enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and dive into that interview.
So can you tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be a stage manager?
Yeah, I started stage managing pretty late, actually. It wasn't until I got to college. I had always been involved in the fine arts. Like, I took dance lessons as a kid, and I did acting in high school. But I knew when I went to college, like, acting wasn't what I wanted to do. But I knew I wanted to be in theater. And I had a lot of friends that did lighting and had some experience with that. And so I was like, oh, I'll try lighting. And I was a sophomore, I think. And the head of our tech department came up to me and was like, you're very organized. Would you like to stage manage a show? We need more stage managers. Okay, sure. Why not? I'll try it. And so I did a show. I did actually A Christmas Carol. I was an assistant stage manager, and I never looked back. I was like, this is what I want to do. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about Christmas Carol today, and the first show I ever did was Christmas Carol. It's the show that has followed me throughout my career. But yeah, it was a really special first show to do, because it was at our local Roadhouse, so it was a big theater. It was a big cast. If I remember correctly, it was 30-something adults and probably 15 kids. So it was, there was a lot happening, but it was so much fun. So I couldn't do anything but stage manage after that.
I think, like many of our journeys, it began in high school. I never seemed to get the lead in high school. I always got the third or the fourth supporting actor role, really great roles, but never the lead. And then in my junior year of high school, Mr. Barry H. Kaplan, who ran the theater program, asked me to stage manage The Crucible, and it was a catch-22. I had to decide before auditions. So I took the job. My dad was crushed because he wouldn't see his little girl on stage. But in retrospect, it led me on a career journey I never would have expected. Back in the 1970s, there was no internet. So figuring out one's theatrical journey really started from your local world. So that was my way in. I went to State University of New York, Stony Brook, which had, at the time, an amazing theater program. I got my MFA in stage management from the Yale School of Drama. I was there from 1984 to 1987. It was also the time of Athol Fugard. And my thesis in my third year was Athol Fugard's A Place with the Pigs, which was a world premiere play that he wrote, directed, and starred in. So Athol was the wave, I like to call it, in terms of the wave I caught out of graduate school. Many of the grad students were catching a wave to Broadway on August Wilson plays. Mine happened to have been with Athol Fugard.
So how long have you been working as a stage manager? And then specifically with this production, which is, you're at the Alley Theatre, right? How long have you been working on the Alley Theatre's production of A Christmas Carol?
I've been professionally stage managing for about 8 years. I started working right after I graduated from undergraduate at the University of Arkansas at Theater Squared, which is a regional SBT there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I was there for 2 years. I took a break to go to grad school and then came to the Alley and have been at the Alley for 5 years. I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary in August, actually. And I've done Christmas Carol every year, so that's 5 total Christmas carols. Technically 6 because we did a digital one this year, but it wasn't the same script.
Well, I've been a professional production stage manager since 1984. I joined Actors Equity in the fall of 1987. Actually, it was kind of a trifecta. I got 3 equity jobs all at the same time. Working with Jorge Cachero at New York Theater Workshop as the replacement assistant stage manager on the Broadway company of Me and My Girl, working with the impeccable Steve Zweigbaum, and I learned to call my first Broadway show from the incomparable Arturo Perazzi, and Road to Mecca. So all 3 of those contracts happened like in the same week. So that was sort of the start of my professional career. In terms of McCarter, I've been the supervising stage manager of McCarter Theatre's A Christmas Carol since 1994. I've been part of the journey of David Thompson's script and adaptation through 3 productions. I am the production stage manager, but the scope of my job is a little larger than what a production stage manager does. I'm involved in aspects of the line producing and the audition process for the community ensemble and the young ensemble, more so during Michael Unger's production than the current production. But my work starts in August. I haven't fallen apart this November and December without Christmas Carol in my life, because I'm very fortunate to be part of the New Arts virtual Christmas Carol. New Arts is in Newtown, Connecticut, where the Sandy Hook tragedy happened. Actually, today is the anniversary, December 14th. We are recording on December 14th, which is the anniversary of the school shooting in Sandy Hook. And after that tragedy, the community came together using arts as a healing process for the community. And to this day, Michael Unger has been the artistic director of that mission. So we are doing a virtual Christmas Carol based on the script used at McCarter Theatre for the past 3 decades, and it's David Thompson's adaptation. And it's been magical. I'm working with 8 of the actors that performed in Christmas Carol since 2000 at McCarter, and it's just been an absolute joy.
So how did you get started with this production specifically? Like, where did you start in the team? And then how long has it been running before you joined the team?
So before I started, it was running 12 years. And before that, they had a different version of Christmas Carol that had also run for, I think, 15 years. So Christmas Carol has been a big tradition at the Alley for a long, long, long time. So I started as a production assistant. That was my job right out of grad school. I was hired as a production assistant for the Alley. And you sort of just like fit right in. It was just like handed the track and here's what you do, which was kind of nice, just to be handed a piece of paper and your job was to figure out ways to make it better and not to just create the paperwork. It's a different way of thinking. So I was a production assistant for 2 years. So in 2017, they promoted me, I guess. They made me equity. And I started ASMing in 2017. And then in 2018, I learned to call the show. So I was the calling sub. Because, it's Christmas Carol. There was 1 year we did 10 shows a year, but mostly we do 10 shows a week. Mostly we do 9. And that can get pretty hard. There's a lot of cues. There's maybe 5 minutes total in the whole show where you're not speaking. So, it's a very busy show. Lots of automation, lights. You have children that you're cueing on, and like you're talking a lot. So it was nice to have a sub. I'd call like maybe 1 show a week. So I have done almost every position in A Christmas Carol except for the young cast coordinator. I've never run a young cast track, but I've shadowed them, so I feel like I could jump in on that too. But I feel like I know this show pretty well at this point.
Well, how I stepped through the door at McCarter Theatre is actually a result of really strong networking that at the time I wasn't aware was happening. You know, you never quite realize how you get a job or how a door gets open for you. When I was a sophomore at SUNY Stony Brook, we had a guest artist contract where Broadway stage manager Laura DeBuise Hastings was brought in as the production supervisor of a very big musical. She was assisting the great Susie Corden, a brilliant Del Hughes winner and Broadway stage manager. Impeccable woman. And they were doing Noises Off. And Laura invited me backstage to watch Susie call the show. And I was kind of blown away by these two women leading this production. And this was back in the 1980s. There were very few female stage managers on Broadway, Mary Porter Hall and Sally Jacobs. And I was seeing these two phenomenal women leading this Broadway production. So I guess I did all the right things. I handled myself backstage well. I wrote a thank you note. I kept in touch. And 8 years later, that backstage observation and networking paid off, which kind of blows my mind that something, a seed you plant 8 years later, you know, pays off. So I was actually brought in for McCarter Theatre's The Three Sisters, which, let me tell you, it was like a movie star. It was like movie star Chekhov. Frances McDormand, Laura San Giacomo, Linda Hunt, Mary Stuart Masterson. It was amazing. So that is how I got my foot in the door at McCarter Theatre. I had been in New York for about 4 years at that point, had done 4 Broadway shows, and was then one of the resident stage managers for New York City Opera. I was part of their core of 5 staff stage managers. Had I not observed Noises Off when I was 22 years old, I might not have had the career I have to date. Now, in terms of Christmas Carol, I took over as production stage manager the 4th year of the run of the new production by David Thompson back in 1994. In the first 3 years of that production running, they went through 4 production stage managers in 3 years. So you reflect on that for a moment. There were obviously some issues. It was a very complicated production. And by the time Susie got her hands on it as the PS, she was not the original PSM, but she got everything sort of in order in the 3rd year. And when I took it over in the 4th year, I would say the staff was a little traumatized, you know, having their 4th PSM in their 5th PSM in 4 years. But I understood what the crew and the production staff was going through. And I did not try to turn the production upside down and restructure how it was being called. The way it was being called was not the way I would call a show. Everything was described, and then you said go. There weren't rail numbers or winch numbers. Yes, there were light cue and sound cue numbers, but it was very much described, and then you said go. Instead of saying deck cue 87, you described what happened and then said go. So it's not something I would have done, but I decided to adapt to what they were used to and not fix something that wasn't broken. And it was definitely the right way into that production. Susie Corden departed. She was the resident stage manager for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And when she left, David York, the production manager, asked me to go full time.
So you touched on it a little bit, but how's your approach to remounts different than coming into a fresh show? So either a brand new show or a new production of a show.
Mm-hmm. So a remount, I guess I come in every year thinking like, how can I make this a little bit better? Because even though it's a remount, it's never going to be the exact same show. You know, we have kids who have aged out. There are new kids that you're training up. There's maybe a new understudy. Somebody's in a new role. You have a new crew member. So nothing's ever going to be exactly the same. And it's a great opportunity to look at your paperwork and say, like, you know, where can we make things a little bit better? This transition wasn't ideal last year. What can we do we need to put another crew member on it? Do we need to make the notation clearer? Because I feel like it's sort of easy to fall into the trap of, oh, it's easy, it's Carol. And it's not easy, it's just a known entity. So yeah, I think that's always my approach, is thinking about, like, what can I do to make this a little bit smoother, a little bit, yeah, just like make all the parts and pieces fit a little bit better. Whereas, you know, in a show that you've never done before, it's how do these parts and pieces fit, period.
Right.
It's a little bit more about polishing as opposed to building.
That's such an interesting opportunity to kind of get to revisit something that you've already done. Have you found anything that, like, informs how you approach new shows?
I think a lot of it comes down to clear communication for me. And I think in a show, like I said, that you've done over and over again, but you're getting new people into it, it's how can I focus a lot on the run sheet. So it's how can I make this run sheet super, super clear to anyone who picks it up, which is, you know, constantly something I'm working for in any show. Like, and I like to hand it to, like, my production assistant or someone and be like, hey, can you read this and just make sure it makes sense? The instructions are clear. Like, when I say strike the apple from the Cratchit cupboard, the apple is on the second shelf on the stage left side. Like, how can I make this as clear as possible so somebody isn't confused as to what I mean? And so that practicing that has really informed how I write notes for other shows.
Well, I think the big thing is creating an atmosphere in the rehearsal hall where the new companies feel as though they are experiencing a fresh rehearsal process and giving them the freedom to discover their roles versus them feeling as if they're in a put-in rehearsal or a replacement rehearsal. So we go into every year almost like it's a new production. We give it a full rehearsal process. In terms of any new staff that is working on the production, in terms of the stage management support staff or the directing assistants, which are often McCarter apprentices, our ensemble managers, because we have currently we have a community ensemble manager and a young ensemble manager on top of the 3 stage managers that it takes to run the production. I have them do what I like to call archaeological stage management. And this is something I really learned when I was at New York City Opera. Because at New York City Opera, if you're doing a repertory production, like, for example, the first show that I production stage managed or called at New York City Opera was La Boheme, and it was their repertory production. So you got very little rehearsal. I literally got 1 piano stage rehearsal, no orchestra, no costumes. And that was my only chance to call Boheme at New York City Opera before opening night. So you really have to do your homework and what I call archaeological stage management. So I make, especially any new stage managers, watch the archival videos many, many times, deconstruct the run sheets, the rehearsal run sheets, the prop sheets. Often they sit with a returning stage manager watching the archival video as the returning stage manager talks through what's happening backstage during the show. So we have very deep archives on the show to bring our new supporting staff up to speed and ready to hit the ground running. And I guess my last answer to your question in terms of remounting Christmas Carol is there is space for very special traditions. We're not under the same stress in terms of putting together a new production. So these special traditions lead to building the morale of the company and crew and creating a community throughout the holidays. And we have like a dozen traditions at our Christmas Carol, and they're really special and important
Are there any other challenges that come with Remounts, specific challenges? And then is there anything that you like necessarily better than doing new work, or is it just different?
I think it's just different. I think what I would say that I like better is sort of the tradition that comes around it. Like it's a marking of another year. It's Christmas Carol. It's a holiday season, and there's a lot of tradition that comes with that. Especially with working with kids, we have usually around 22, 24 kids working with us, so 2 teams. And, they're spending their Christmas Eve with us, and so we do a lot of stuff to make it fun. Like, we do a Secret Santa every year, and there's a lot of, like, especially with the kids, like, hiding their presents and helping them find it, and a lot of stuff that comes with that. And we have, every year, the parents have they call it the Parent Appreciation Dinner, where they cook everyone in the cast and crew dinner, and it's just a great time that everyone comes together and hangs out between shows. So I would say it's not necessarily better, but there is a lot of tradition that comes with it that I really enjoy. Other challenges that come with it, it's the same set. The set is pushing 16 years, and every year there's something new, like, oh no, there's a chip in this part of the plank, or there's something or with the costumes, these poor costumes only get rebuilt every so often, so you can tell when a costume sort of reached the end of its life. There's these beautiful dresses at the Fred party scene that the women wear, and they have these lace shawls, and there was one year that just, I think you looked at those lace shawls sideways and they would just kind of come apart. So little things like that, when you're working with the same set over and over again, because it gets kind of beat up a little bit. The same, we're working with the same automation year after year. And again, it's with software programming and updating. Like every year, there's like something new you have to work out because, the program's a tiny bit different. So, little things like that, especially when you're dealing with a show that's 16 years old, the technology has come so far in that amount of time.
Do you have a special memory from this production that sticks out? Any of the years, any of the tracks that you've run, is there a special moment or anything that sticks out in your mind as memorable?
I don't know if it's special, but there's a special challenge that really sticks in my mind. So the first year I was Equity, it was 2017. It was the year of Hurricane Harvey, and our building flooded, which our large stage where we performed Christmas Carol did not flood, was not damaged, but our power supply in the basement flooded. And so, along with our smaller theater, of course, with repairs and construction things, the timetable got shifted. And so we were getting ready for tech, and the power grid wasn't back up. And we were downstairs. I have photos of it somewhere. There's our stage management team in headlamps and flashlights laying spikes while I think lighting was working around us, like trying to do what they could without the lights on, and like sound was doing what they could without power. And it was so chaotic. And we got everything up and running by the time tech started, but it was just one of those, it was a very surreal moment. And I see those photos now and I can't believe that actually happened. But yeah, just the challenges that we faced recovering from Hurricane Harvey, and how good it felt to be back in the building, that first audience that we had. Then just like how enthusiastic people were to be back in the building because they knew that we had flooded during the hurricane. It was a wild year. That was the year we did 10 shows a week, and to make up for some lost time. And it was a really, really, really chaotic year, but it was really rewarding. I think I grew the most as a stage manager at that time, just because there were so many curveballs being thrown.
Speaking of chaotic years, what are you doing this year? Is it digital? Like, is it being filmed on location and streamed, or is it totally Zoom?
It's totally Zoom, I guess you would describe it. It was filmed remotely, everybody in their own homes, on Zoom, but people had, I don't remember the brand, but they had like nice cameras. And then we have a video editor who put it all together to kind of make it look, it's hard to describe because it both does and doesn't look like Zoom, But yeah, it's like a full film that was filmed remotely and then stitched together to kind of not disguise the fact that it was on Zoom, but to sort of, you're not looking at little boxes and the actors, you know, doing the like turning it off and stuff like that. So it was it was a really, really interesting experience. But like I said, it's a different version of Christmas Carol, because our full version has, I think, 20 something actors, understudies, and 22 kids. So we did a smaller version with just 10 actors. Had its own challenges for the actors because the lines, it's Christmas Carol, but the lines are just slightly different. It's reduced the surplus population instead of decreased the surplus population. So there's all these like little things here and there. It's like, wait, that's my old line. But yeah, we've moved digital.
I really don't have a long list of challenges for you. I mean, remounting Christmas Carol is an absolute joy. It's the highlight of every theater season for me. I would say it's like McCarter's equivalent to a bread and butter opera at a major opera company. My commitment to McCarter Theatre for the last 29 seasons is largely due to my desire to commit to an institution whose missions and goals align with mine. I mean, production stage managers, we don't get to pitch our season. I mean, a theater is not going to do a production because the stage management team wants to do it. But I feel if I can commit to an institution whose mission and goals and artistic forward thinking aligns with mine, I am going to be artistically fulfilled. So Christmas Carol is like the equivalent of my big Broadway show each season, and it feeds that bug inside me. What I love about it is the place where everyone at McCarter Theatre can shine in their work, and the production department especially shines. Every staff member owns their niche of the production, and I've had brilliant peers over the years to work with, including my longtime associate and partner, Allison Coate, Ali Hassman, Steve Howe, who I mentioned earlier, Alex Bergeron, our technical director, Michelle Simarco, Cynthia Tom, Paul Kilsdonk, Chris Woolley, and the entire production crew and production staff at McCarter Theatre. Sorry, so I really don't have I don't have horror stories about remounting Christmas Carol.
That's fine.
I mean, we've had our crazy moments and challenges where we had really big hurdles or surprises to deal with. But I mean, the list is not that long. For right. doing this for 26 years, you'd think I'd have this tremendous list of, oh, do you have that story when things went wrong? I mean, we have some really good stories, but it's not much more than half a dozen. Well, I will say that McCarter does not use understudies. We do not have understudies. Coming out of this pandemic, that philosophy might change, but our productions don't really run long enough to get understudies up and running. And at the same time, we're so close to New York, we just don't have understudies. So there was the year when we were doing a student matinee, and at intermission, the then producing director, Mara Isaacs, called me up in the booth and said to me, Cheryl, Jimmy Ludwig, who was playing Fred in The Undertaker, he has to go to the hospital and get his appendix taken out. He's going to make it to the end of the performance today, but he won't be back for tonight's show. What are we going to do? We have no understudies. What are we going to do? And I just said, call Michael. And she's like, call Michael? What, is he going to come down and direct somebody into the role? Michael Unger was the director at the time. I'm like, no, call Michael. He has to go on and play Fred and The Undertaker tonight. He is the only one that we can get ready in an hour and a half to put on tonight. So Michael was called. He was on speakerphone with the directing assistant, reviewing his lines as he was driving down to Princeton from New York. He went straight into a costume fitting. We did an hour and a half put-in rehearsal, and he went on that night as Fred and the Undertaker. And it was one of the greatest gifts I think he says he has ever received. Yeah, so it was a real gift. So he performed Fred and the Undertaker, I think for 2 performances, and then we had enough time to rehearse in one of our ensemble gentlemen who took over the role for about 8 performances till Jimmy came back. So that is sort of one of our more dramatic backstage stories.
So do you have any special memories from any year of this production? Anything that really sticks out, other than what we've already talked about, where it's like kind of the memorable things that go wrong, but anything just that makes you happy when you think about it every year?
Guiding the 8 different Scrooges that I've had the honor to work with through their journey. I would say I fall in love with each and every Scrooge. And in terms of my personal journey and memories, I would say reaching my 500th performance was a really big goal for me and meant a lot to get to that point. Now I am at 695 performances, and I will not reach 700 this season due to COVID. So that makes me sad. But in the next 2 weeks, what I'm doing for New Arts will bring me up to 697, because we are doing the production twice. Even though it's going to air 6 times, I don't think airing a recording counts as an additional performance. So I think it's 2. I think I get 2 this year, not 6. So my goal is to be back in the saddle live and able to do this to reach number 700. A great memory is the 30 performances that I called 5 stories up in the theater 9 months pregnant. So the booth, you have to go up like this ship's ladder to get to the booth. And the year that I was pregnant with my now 16-year-old son, Jake, I was 9 months pregnant. He was born in January. So I was very pregnant during the run of Christmas Carol. And I remember my stage management peers, Rich Constable and Robert Cohn, were like, Cheryl, you call Actors Equity. They got to make sure that you have a booth down at the back of the theater so you don't have to walk up that ship's ladder. I'm like, guys, I'm fine. So my then intern would spot me on the way up the ladder. And Skippy, who was one of our follow spot operators, one of our beloved members of the crew, would spot me on the way down to make sure I got up and down from the booth safely. One of the most important aspects of my journey on Christmas Carol is the success of my stage management staff, because over 50 young emerging stage managers got their start on a very big production through McCarter's Christmas Carol, and seeing their success in their careers have given me some of my greatest fulfillment in my career.
Speaking of those stage managers of tomorrow, do you have any advice for the stage managers of the future, either for Remounts or just in stage managing in general?
Well, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So I feel I have not worked a day in my life. Well, there might be one production I did that I didn't quite get why we were doing it. So I feel like on that production, I felt like I was going to work every day. But other than that, I think I have a pretty good track record of absolutely loving everything that I'm working on.
In terms of Remounts, I would say, I think I said this earlier, but don't fall in the trap of thinking it's easy just because it's the same thing every year. It's a great opportunity to learn and to build and to try new things and to see how you can make something more efficient or just cleaner, neater. Don't think just because it's the same thing, it's easy and you can take a break, because it's really easy to fall into that trap.
Follow your artistic mission as a theater maker. And I feel that was emblazoned into my heart by Athol Fugard. I really learned that from Athol.
And then my advice for stage managers in general, I would say be open to opportunity. I remember when I was an undergraduate and it the undergraduate program that I was taught was like very New York and Chicago and LA centric. Like you got your undergraduate degree and you're going to go to these big cities and that's what you do. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. If that's your career path, you should absolutely do that. But if that doesn't sound like what you want to do, don't pressure yourself into doing it. I love New York, I love Chicago. I've never lived either place. And there's a lot of opportunity in the regions and in other cities. Like, I mean, Houston is the third or fourth largest city in the country, and there's plenty of opportunity here. So don't put yourself into too narrow of a box. Like, really look and see what's out there, because there's a lot of great opportunities that you could miss if you don't look for them.
And lastly, open the doors for those behind you, because they might someday be the one hiring you. You never know where people end up.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you did, give me a big thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and let me know in the comments down below if you've ever worked on a production of A Christmas Carol. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. My name is Kent, and this has been your half-hour call. This snazzy feathered production assistant, as well as other cool stage management merchandise, is now available at kentjamescollins.com/store. Link in the description below.